The day I walked out of the Oregon State Correctional Institution, the November rain was falling so violently it felt as though the sky itself was trying to wash 9 years from my skin. I stood beyond the gate holding a brown paper bag. Inside it was everything the state believed remained of my life. A telephone that no longer held a charge. A wallet containing $43. And a silver watch my father had placed around my wrist on my 30th birthday. 9 years. 3,285 mornings waking beneath fluorescent lights. 9 birthdays behind concrete walls. 9 Christmases listening to other men pretend they were not thinking about home. 9 years imprisoned for a crime I did not commit. And while I was locked away, the world continued moving as if Frank Callahan had never existed. My name is Frank Callahan. I was 64 years old when those gates opened. Before prison, I owned Callahan Freight Solutions. I had built it from one truck, a rented warehouse, and more stubbornness than money. By the time everything was taken from me, the company was worth $42 million. We moved freight across 11 western states. 400 people worked for us. Most of them called me Frank. I knew the names of their spouses. I knew which employees had children graduating from high school. I knew whose mother was sick and who needed an extra week before repaying an employee loan. That company was not only a business. It was the physical shape of almost 30 years of my life. I also had a house in Lake Oswego. A wife named Carol. A daughter named Lauren, who was the reason I got out of bed every morning. And a business partner named Dennis Hartley. Dennis was the man I trusted more than anyone who did not share my blood. I believed Carol loved me. I believed Dennis would protect the company if anything happened to me. I believed loyalty meant the same thing to them that it meant to me. Every one of those beliefs was wrong. The federal tax fraud investigation began in the spring of 2015. I remember the exact morning. Rain against the conference room windows. Coffee growing cold beside my right hand. 3 federal agents entering the office with identification badges and a stack of documents thick enough to change the temperature in the room. They placed the first folder in front of me. Shell corporations I had never heard of. Offshore accounts carrying my name. Invoices for work that had never happened. Payments to companies that did not exist. Authorizations containing signatures that looked almost exactly like mine. Almost. That word haunted me. The signatures were almost mine. The paperwork was almost believable. The evidence was almost too perfect. And that was precisely why the investigators believed it. My accountant had worked for me for 11 years. I had attended his daughter's wedding. I had approved paid leave when his wife underwent surgery. He sat across from me inside the conference room and told federal investigators I had personally ordered him to falsify company records. He said it calmly. He did not look down. He did not hesitate. Mr. Callahan instructed me to hide the payments. He knew exactly what he was doing. I stared at him, waiting for the moment when his expression would break. I thought perhaps he was frightened. Perhaps somebody had threatened him. Perhaps this was part of a misunderstanding that would collapse once the truth was examined carefully. But no one was examining the truth. They were examining the evidence. And every piece of evidence had been designed to point toward me. My defense attorney had spent 30 years handling complex financial cases. After reviewing the documents, he removed his glasses and looked at me. I have never seen a financial setup this complete. So you believe me? I believe the evidence was manufactured. Then we prove it. His face did not change. Frank, proving that is going to be much harder than believing it. The jury saw a wealthy businessman accused of becoming greedy. They saw numbers too complicated to follow. They saw employees who had been coached. They saw signatures that looked like mine. They saw offshore accounts bearing my name. And after 3 days of deliberation, they found me guilty. The judge sentenced me to 12 years. I served 9 with credit for good behavior. The words good behavior make people imagine obedience. Keeping your head down. Following rules. Not fighting. But inside prison, good behavior can mean something deeper. It can mean refusing to allow rage to turn you into the man everyone already believes you are. Carol visited twice during my first year. Both times, she cried inside the visitation room. She pressed her hand against the glass and told me she knew I was innocent. She told me she was fighting for me. She told me she would wait. We will survive this. I promise. The divorce papers arrived 14 months into my sentence. There was a short letter attached. Carol wrote that she could not put her life on hold. She said she had found someone who could be present in ways I no longer could. I read that sentence inside my cell until the words stopped looking like language. Later, I discovered the person she had found was Dennis. My business partner. My friend. The man who had sat beside Carol during my trial and squeezed her shoulder whenever the prosecutor spoke. By then, their relationship did not surprise me. Very little could. What nearly destroyed me was Lauren. My daughter was 27 when I went to prison. She worked as a marketing manager for a technology company in Portland. She was successful, independent, engaged to a young man named Tom, whom I genuinely liked. She had built a life that did not depend on my name or money. I was proud of her for that. When I was charged, the company Dennis now controlled ended a consulting agreement with Lauren's employer. The official reason was conflict of interest. Her employer decided she had become a liability. They let her go. Tom's family pressured him to distance himself from the daughter of a convicted criminal. The engagement ended. Lauren spent 3 years attempting to rebuild in Portland before finally moving to Tacoma, where fewer people recognized the name Callahan. She never told me. For the first 2 years, she wrote faithfully. Long letters. Carefully cheerful letters. Stories about work. Weather. Books she had read. Restaurants she thought we should visit when I came home. I later understood that every sentence had been constructed to protect me. She believed prison was already taking enough. She would not allow it to take my hope. Then the letters became shorter. Fewer details. More blank space. Eventually, they stopped. I called when I could. Sometimes she answered. Whenever I asked how she was doing, she gave the same answer. "I'm fine, Dad." She was not fine. And I was trapped behind walls, unable to do anything except hear the exhaustion she was trying to hide. 3 years after I entered prison, Lauren gave birth to a boy. My grandson. His name was Marcus. His father left when he was 18 months old. Lauren raised him alone inside a 2-bedroom apartment in Tacoma. She worked as an office manager for a dental practice. She drove a car with more than 200,000 miles on it. She clipped grocery coupons. My daughter, who had grown up inside a 4,000 square foot home, counted every dollar to feed my grandson. Meanwhile, Dennis lived inside my house. He had married Carol. He ran the company I had built. During interviews, he referred to himself as the founder. He sat in my chair at the head of the conference table. He parked inside the space that once displayed my name. The sign had been replaced with his. Every visible trace of me had been removed. I learned these things through a private investigator named Ray Decker. Ray was 61. A former Portland detective. He had left the department after what official records described as a disagreement over investigative procedure. The truth was simpler. He had objected to watching the wrong man get convicted. I hired him using the last money inside a small savings account Dennis had somehow missed while dismantling my life. When I called from a prison telephone and explained the case, Ray remained silent for several seconds. Then he said, "I remember your trial. I always believed something was wrong with it." That was enough. Over the following months, Ray uncovered a version of my life far uglier than the one I had known. Dennis had been stealing from the company for 4 years before my arrest. Small amounts at first. Amounts buried inside fuel contracts, vendor payments, and equipment leases. Then the theft grew. Confidence often makes criminals careless. By late 2014, the discrepancies had become large enough that our controller was close to discovering them. Dennis needed somewhere to place the blame. He chose me. He and Carol had already been involved for at least 2 years. Carol had access to personal documents, tax records, signature samples, account numbers, copies of identification. Everything Dennis needed to create a financial trail in my name. They hired a forensic accountant named Steve Molina. Steve had a reputation for performing technically clean work for morally dirty clients. His task was not merely to conceal Dennis's theft. It was to redirect it. Every fraudulent payment was reassigned to me. Accounts were created using my identity. Invoices were backdated. Authorizations were forged. Electronic records were altered. By the time investigators arrived, the evidence was flawless. And every path led to Frank Callahan. Ray laid the evidence in front of me at a diner near the bus station during my first week outside. He slid a thick folder across the table. I read while my coffee turned cold. Bank records, property transfers, corporate filings, photographs, names and dates. The architecture of my destruction, arranged neatly beneath metal clips. What about Steve Molina? Ray leaned back. He is living in Boise. Dennis paid him well until your conviction. After that, the payments stopped. Steve now handles small accounting jobs. He drinks too much and sleeps too little. You spoke to him? Informally. What did he say? He did not deny anything. He looked out the window and said he supposed the past would catch him eventually. I closed the folder. Desperate men make terrible decisions. Ray nodded. They also make useful witnesses. For 3 weeks, I watched. I did not call Dennis. I did not drive near the house. I did not contact former employees. I allowed no one connected to the company to learn what I had discovered. 9 years inside prison had taught me something anger never could. Patience is sharper when it has a purpose. And I intended to use it carefully. I went to Lauren first. She opened the door of her apartment on a Tuesday evening. For 5 full seconds, neither of us spoke. She had Carol's eyes. But the stubborn line of her jaw belonged to me. The 9 years I had lost were visible across her face. Not as age. As exhaustion. The expression of someone who had carried too much for too long without allowing herself to put it down. Dad? Then her voice disappeared. She stepped toward me. I opened my arms. And my daughter, who had spent years pretending to be strong for everyone else, collapsed against my chest. She cried like the 27-year-old who had lost her father. She cried like the woman who had lost a career, an engagement, a home, and the ability to trust the future. And I held her knowing no embrace could return the years she had survived alone. We sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours. Marcus worked on homework inside the next room. Every few minutes, I heard a chair move or a pencil roll across the floor. Lauren told me everything the letters had hidden. The lost job. The broken engagement. The interviews where people recognized her last name. The nights she cried after Marcus went to sleep. The fear that she would never be able to give him the life she believed he deserved. Why did you not tell me? Lauren wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. Because you were inside, and I was outside. There was nothing either of us could do. You should not have carried it alone. What would telling you have changed? She looked directly at me. What would knowing have helped? I had no answer. What I had was purpose. So I told her the truth. I told her I had not spent 9 years doing nothing. I had constructed something inside prison. It had no warehouse. No employees. No registration documents. But it was real. A case. A plan. A structure for taking back everything that could still be recovered. Lauren gave me the same look she had used as a teenager whenever she believed I was underestimating a problem. Dad, Dennis has money. He has lawyers. He has spent 9 years placing himself inside the company. We have a rented apartment and a car that needs an alternator. We have the truth. The truth did not help you during the trial. No. I leaned closer. But this time, we have evidence he does not know exists. She raised one eyebrow. What else do we have? Me. Lauren did not speak. Dennis believes I came home broken. He believes I have nothing. He thinks the most dangerous thing I can do is become angry. He does not know what I prepared. He does not know I learned to wait. And he does not know I have already begun. Lauren looked toward the next room. Then called. "Marcus, come here." A small boy walked into the kitchen with a pencil tucked behind one ear and a math worksheet inside his hand. He was 6. Small for his age. He had Lauren's eyes and my habit of becoming completely still whenever thinking carefully. He studied me with the honest suspicion children reserve for unfamiliar adults. Lauren rested her hand on his shoulder. "This is your grandfather." Marcus looked at me. "You were in prison." It was not an accusation. Only a fact he was attempting to place in the correct part of the story. I was. "Did you do the thing?" "No. They said I did. But I did not." He considered that. "Like wrongful conviction? We learned about that in school." "Exactly like that." He nodded once. Then climbed into the chair beside me as though the matter had been settled. I pointed toward his worksheet. "Show me what you are working on." He spread the paper between us. That was the moment I understood the real reason I was fighting. Not the company. Not the house. Not even my reputation. I was fighting for every year stolen from that table. Every math problem I had missed. Every birthday. Every question Marcus should have been able to ask his grandfather. The things Dennis had taken were not only assets. They were ordinary moments. And ordinary moments are what a life is made of. Finding Steve Molina took 1 week. Ray had his Boise address and a general understanding of his schedule. I drove there alone on a Thursday. I found him inside a coffee shop he used as a temporary office on weekday mornings. He was smaller than I expected. Mid-50s. Thinning hair. Carefully pressed shirt. The rigid stillness of a man who spent every day attempting not to resemble his own guild. I sat across from him without asking permission. Steve looked up from his laptop. Recognition crossed his face. Then fear. Then something almost like relief. That last expression surprised me. "Mr. Callahan." "That is right. How did you find me? Does it matter?" Steve closed the computer. His hands were trembling. "I expected this. After you were released, I began thinking about what I would say." I leaned forward. "Then say it." For 90 minutes, Steve filled every remaining gap. Dennis approached him in late 2014 through a commercial real estate contact. The offer was simple. Restructure the records. Redirect the fraud. Make the trail lead toward Frank Callahan. Accept payment. Remain silent. Steve told himself I was probably guilty of something. That wealthy businessman always had hidden crimes. That he was only performing technical work. He believed those excuses for approximately 6 months. Then I went to prison. Lauren lost her job. An article about my daughter appeared online. And Steve had not slept more than 4 hours at a time since. "I need you to sign a complete statement." He looked toward the window. A full description of what was done. How it was done. What Dennis instructed. How much you were paid. If I do that, Dennis will come after me. Dennis will soon be in no position to come after anyone. Steve looked at me. "What do I receive?" "You receive the ability to stop carrying this alone. You receive one opportunity to look at yourself without lying. I will speak to the federal prosecutor about your cooperation. I cannot promise immunity. I cannot promise freedom. But I can promise that remaining silent will be worse. Because I am going to expose everything with or without you. And when it collapses, you should decide which side of the truth you want to be standing on." Steve stared outside for a long time. Cars passed. A woman pushed a stroller across the intersection. The ordinary world continued while one man decided whether to admit he had helped destroy another. Finally, Steve spoke. "I kept everything." My expression remained still. "What does everything mean?" "The original documents. The account structures. My communications with Dennis. Payment records. Backup copies. All of it." "Why?" I called it insurance. He looked down. But I think I knew this day would come. Good. I stood. Bring it to me. I drove back to Portland with a folder on the passenger seat worth more than anything I owned. Ray and I spent 2 weeks organizing the evidence. Steve's original records. Proof of payments. Documents tracing the fraudulent accounts. A second forensic accountant reviewed everything and signed an opinion stating that the original company records had been deliberately altered. A digital specialist recovered email conversations between Dennis and Steve from an account Dennis believed had been permanently deleted. The emails were detailed. Direct. Devastating. Dennis had written the plan inside his own words. He had trusted technology to bury his arrogance. Technology remembered. When everything was ready, I called Dennis. He answered on the third ring. His voice had the polished comfort of a man who had lived without consequences for too long. He said my name carefully. Like someone managing a difficult customer. Frank. I heard you were released. How are you? I am doing extremely well. A pause. I would like to come to the house. We have several things to discuss. The Lake Oswego house? That is the one. Sunday morning. 9 o'clock. Another pause. Longer this time. Frank, I do not believe that is a good idea. Carol is. Tell Carol I'm coming. I ended the call. Sunday morning, I drove to Lake Oswego inside a car Ray had loaned me. I wore clothing that was clean but unimpressive. I had considered my appearance carefully. I did not want Dennis to see resources. I wanted him to see exactly what he believed he had created. A diminished man. A tired former prisoner. Someone manageable. The front door opened before I reached the steps. Carol stood inside the entrance. 15 years of marriage and 9 years of absence had created a version of her I recognized physically but not emotionally. She carried Dennis's expression now. That controlled stillness of people who have repeated a lie until they no longer remember the original truth. Walter. She stopped herself. Frank. Hello, Carol. The living room had been redecorated. The furniture I selected was gone. Family photographs had vanished. In their place were expensive neutral prints. The kind of art that costs money but reveals nothing. Dennis stood near the fireplace with the posture of a man protecting his territory. He was heavier than I remembered. He wore a cashmere sweater that likely cost more than the vehicle I had arrived in. He smiled. The smile did not reach his eyes. Frank. It is good to see you. He extended his hand. I did not take it. I sat inside the chair nearest the door. Dennis slowly lowered his arm and sat across from me. Carol remained near the hallway. She appeared uncertain whether she was supposed to stay or disappear. Dennis cleared his throat. I understand you have experienced a difficult time. And whatever resentment you may feel toward me. I do not have resentment. He paused. I have evidence. The room became silent in the particular way rooms become silent when everyone inside has suddenly stopped pretending. I have Steve Molina's signed statement. Dennis's face changed. I have the original records he altered. I have payment documentation. I have a forensic accountant's report. I have a digital recovery analysis. And I have your emails. The emails you believed had been deleted. The ones where you explained the entire plan because you were arrogant enough to believe no one would ever ask you to account for it. Carol did not move. Dennis attempted to speak. I continued. You framed me. Not because I committed a crime. Because you had been stealing. You needed somewhere to place the evidence. You wanted my company. You wanted my wife. You wanted my house. And removing me solved every problem at once. I looked directly at Dennis. You destroyed Lauren's life. You cost my grandson the first 6 years he should have had with me. You slept inside this house. You sat at my table. You occupied my office. And you did all of it believing I would never return with anything stronger than anger. Dennis found his voice. Whatever you believe you have. I removed a small recorder. Then pressed play. Steve's voice filled the room. Clear. Controlled. He described the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the forged signatures, Dennis's instructions, the payment amounts, the dates, the agreement to remain silent, the exact process used to redirect the fraud toward me. I allowed the recording to play for 4 minutes. Then I turned it off. The refrigerator was running inside the kitchen. That was the only sound. Dennis looked at Carol. Carol looked back. For the first time, I understood what had held them together. It was not love. It was complicity. Two people connected by a shared crime neither could admit without destroying the other. Now they watched each other as the structure they had built began collapsing. What do you want? Dennis's voice was quieter. I want the company. I want this house. I want every asset acquired using money taken from me during my imprisonment. I want a complete written confession. I want full cooperation with the federal investigation that will occur whether you cooperate or not. I want Carol to sign a statement acknowledging what she knew and renouncing any claim to assets obtained through the fraud. And I want Lauren and Marcus made financially secure. Dennis stared at me. That is insane. The polish had disappeared from his voice. He sounded like what he was. A man watching every exit close. You cannot prove. I can prove everything. I spent 9 years inside a cell, Dennis. I did not spend that time grieving. I spent it preparing. You had money. Lawyers. Access. A company. A house. And every advantage. All I had was time.
I used mine more carefully than you used yours.
Carol spoke for the first time. Her voice was flat. Stripped of everything I had once associated with her. What happens to me? I looked at the woman I had once expected to grow old beside. I had imagined that moment hundreds of times. In some versions, I hated her. In others, I demanded answers. But sitting inside that room, I felt something quieter. A finished sadness. The feeling of setting down a weight and only then realizing how long you have carried it. You cooperate. You sign the statements my attorneys place in front of you. You tell the complete truth. In exchange, I will not personally advocate for prosecution. The authorities will make their own decision. But if you hide anything, delay anything, or lie about anything, every detail of what you knew will become public. Carol nodded once. She did not look at Dennis again. The negotiation lasted 11 days. Dennis's attorneys made the expected threats. They raised questions about time limits. Challenged Steve's credibility. Questioned the admissibility of evidence. Mentioned defamation lawsuits no one inside the room believed they would file. I sat beside my attorney and never raised my voice. I had said everything necessary inside my living room. The rest was paperwork. Dennis eventually pleaded guilty to federal tax fraud, conspiracy, and financial forgery. He received 10 years in federal prison, with the possibility of release after 7. His attorneys presented the outcome as cooperation in exchange for leniency. Technically, that was true. It changed nothing about what he had done. Carol provided complete statements. Her cooperation allowed her to avoid criminal charges. She moved to her sister's home in Phoenix. We have not spoken since. I do not know whether she regrets betraying me. I no longer need to know. Steve received a reduced sentence. 18 months suspended. 3 years of probation. A permanent prohibition from working in financial services. He cooperated completely. Afterward, he sent me a handwritten letter. I left it unopened for 2 weeks. When I finally read it, there were 4 paragraphs. The final line said, "I know this cannot restore what I helped take from you. I am sorry. It is not enough. But it is everything I have left to give." I placed the letter inside a drawer. It remains there. Recovering the company was easier legally than rebuilding it operationally. Dennis had maintained the appearance of profitability while allowing the business itself to weaken. Client relationships had deteriorated. Major contracts had not been renewed. 2 distribution centers operated far below capacity. Experienced managers had left. Dennis had polished the surface while the foundation cracked beneath him. The board had been filled with people loyal to Dennis. Once the evidence became public, that loyalty disappeared rapidly. 4 long-term members remained. People who had known me before the arrest. People who privately admitted they had never been completely comfortable with the case against me. I asked why they had remained silent. None had a satisfying answer. Fear creates silence in respectable rooms just as effectively as inside prison. Justice came faster than recovery. Rebuilding the company took longer. I met with clients. Rehired managers. Closed wasteful contracts. Reviewed routes. Visited warehouses. Learned new systems that had not existed when I was arrested. At 64, I was rebuilding the business I had already spent one lifetime creating. But this time, I knew exactly what it was worth. Lauren returned to Portland. She did not immediately join the company. That was her decision. I respected it. For most of her adult life, my name had caused damage. I would not demand that she build her future beneath it again. She found an apartment she liked. She enrolled Marcus in a school with a strong art program. He had inherited his grandmother's sense of color and proportion. I chose to view that as one of life's more complicated jokes. Marcus and I created a routine. Every Saturday morning, we met at a diner 2 blocks from his school. He told me about his week. Teachers. Art projects. Playground arguments. Books he liked. I told him stories about Lauren growing up. The time she painted the family dog blue using washable poster paint. The time she attempted to run away and packed only cookies and 1 sock. The time she informed her 3rd grade teacher that her father owned all the trucks in Oregon. I told Marcus about my father. His great-grandfather. A man who had taught me that businesses were built by keeping promises even when nobody was watching. Marcus listened with the same still attention he had shown me over the math worksheet. I could see him constructing an understanding of the world. Deciding what kind of man he might become. And I felt the enormous responsibility of being allowed to help build that understanding. One evening, 8 months after I returned to the Lake Oswego house, I sat on the back porch. October light passed through the trees and turned everything the color of old gold. Inside, Marcus helped Lauren set the table. I heard them debating whether forks belonged on the left or the right. Marcus declared that forks should go wherever made the most sense geometrically. Lauren laughed. That sound reached me through the open door. For a moment, the house no longer felt like a place I had recovered. It felt like a home. I thought about Steve's letter inside the drawer. Carol in Phoenix, carrying whatever weight comes from choices like hers. Dennis inside a federal prison, living with the particular boredom of a man who believed intelligence would protect him from consequences. Then I remembered a question Lauren had asked 2 weeks after Dennis signed the plea agreement. Dad, did you ever consider that the hatred might have damaged you more than the prison? I had not answered immediately. I thought about her question for 3 days. Then I told her what I had decided. What I felt was not hatred. She waited. Hatred has no direction. It spreads. It destroys whatever carries it. What I felt was precision. A decision to become more careful than the people who betrayed me. To wait longer. Document everything. Speak quietly. Keep my face still. And move only when the moment was correct. That is not hatred. That is what it looks like when a man refuses to let the worst thing that happened to him become the only thing that defines him. Lauren stared at me for a moment. Then said, Dad, you are going to need to become slightly less intense before Marcus's teachers start calling. I told her I would try. She said trying was probably enough. There is another part of this story people rarely discuss. Compensation. The question of what society owes someone after stealing years from his life. There are federal compensation procedures for people who are officially exonerated. The amount may sound large when reduced to a number on paper. But no calculation accounts for everything. Lost income. Lost business value. Damage to a daughter's career. The destruction of relationships. The years a grandson grows without knowing his grandfather. Money matters. I will not pretend it does not. Financial compensation helps restore housing, medical care, security, education. It can return choices. But money does not return a single morning. It does not return a child's first word, a first day of school, a birthday candle, an ordinary Tuesday dinner. Time cannot be refunded. My civil claims against Dennis and Steve continued after the criminal case. My attorneys believed the financial recovery would be substantial. But the deeper purpose was acknowledgement. A legal statement saying, "This happened. It was wrong. And the people responsible are accountable." That acknowledgement took 9 years of imprisonment and almost 2 additional years of work after my release. Justice was possible. But it was not fast. The slowness became another form of punishment. Every filing, every delay, every hearing, every month waiting for someone else to confirm what I had known from the beginning. I was innocent. There are losses no court can address. The years Lauren spent rebuilding alone. The nights Marcus went to sleep without a grandfather to call. The ordinary days that accumulated inside prison while the rest of my family lived without me. Those losses belong to us. They cannot be transferred to a defendant. They cannot be entered into a spreadsheet. They are grief. And grief does not recognize legal victories. One Saturday, Marcus became unusually quiet at the diner. He pushed a piece of pancake through syrup with his fork. Then looked at me. "Grandpa?" "Yes? I think it is unfair that we missed each other for so long." His voice was serious. The way children speak when they have discovered something adults have spent years avoiding. "You are right. It was unfair. Can they give the time back?" "No." He looked down. "Then what happens?" I reached across the table. "From now on, Saturdays belong to us. Every breakfast. Every story. Every dinner your mother makes where the forks are placed incorrectly. Every normal day. We use all of them." Marcus considered this. Then said, "Okay. But forks still go on the left." He was correct. They do. People sometimes ask what it felt like to see Dennis sentenced. They expect satisfaction. Perhaps triumph. Perhaps the pleasure of revenge. The truth was quieter. I felt the closing of a door. Not a prison door. A door inside me. The part of my life controlled by what Dennis had done was finally losing its authority. I did not recover because he entered prison. I recovered because I stopped waiting for his destruction to become my healing. My healing was Lauren returning to Portland. Marcus asking for another story. Employees trusting me again. Walking into a warehouse and hearing someone call, "Morning, Frank." As if 9 years had not erased my right to belong there. The first time I returned to the company headquarters, 400 people did not line the hallway and applaud. Life rarely provides scenes that perfect. Some employees cried. Some avoided my eyes because they had believed the charges. Some approached quietly and apologized. Others simply shook my hand. One warehouse supervisor named Miguel had worked for me for 22 years. He stood near the loading dock and stared at me. Then embraced me so suddenly I almost lost my balance. "I knew you would come back." "Did you?" He wiped his face. "No. But I hoped." Hope. That word had followed me through every stage. Carol pretended to offer it. Lauren tried to preserve it. Ray gave it evidence. Steve gave it documents. Marcus gave it a face. But hope alone would not have saved me. Hope needed discipline, records, patience, and the willingness to keep moving when no one could promise the outcome. Dennis had calculated many things. He calculated how investigators would interpret the records, how the jury would see a wealthy defendant, how quickly Carol would divorce me, how easily a company could be rebranded under his name, how long it would take for former employees to stop mentioning mine. He calculated the value of my house, my shares, my absence. But he failed to calculate patience. He failed to understand what 9 years of forced stillness could create inside a man with nothing left to lose. He believed time would weaken me. Time sharpened me. He believed isolation would erase me. Isolation gave me focus. He believed prison would become the final chapter. It became preparation. That does not mean prison made me stronger in some beautiful or necessary way. There was nothing beautiful about it. I would trade every lesson to recover the years. Pain does not become acceptable merely because you survive it. But survival gives you a choice. You can allow the pain to define the remaining story. Or you can use what remains to write something else. My name is Frank Callahan. I owned a $42 million company. A house in Lake Oswego. A marriage I believed was real. A friendship I believed was loyal. A life I had built from nothing. A man I called my partner took all of it while I was looking in the wrong direction. I spent 9 years inside a cell intended for a guilty man. I walked out carrying $43. A useless telephone. My father's watch. And the truth. I recovered my house. I recovered my company. I recovered my legal name. But none of those things mattered as much as one Saturday morning inside a diner when a 6-year-old boy pushed a math worksheet toward me and asked for help. The people who tried to erase me are gone from my life. Dennis is behind federal walls. Carrie lives far away with the truth she chose. Steve carries a record and a letter that cannot repair what he did. The accountant who testified against me eventually admitted he had been pressured and paid. The old board has been replaced. The sign outside my parking space displays my name again. But the greatest evidence that I survived is not my name on a sign. It is Lauren laughing inside the kitchen. Marcus correcting the placement of silverware. The sound of ordinary life filling a house that had been silent for too long. If someone you trusted has betrayed you, I want you to understand something. The people who hurt you often believe they have calculated the entire cost. They think they understand your limits. They believe they know when you will break. They count on your trust making their betrayal easier. They count on shame keeping you silent. They count on exhaustion making you surrender. But there are things they cannot calculate. Patience. Purpose. Documentation. The strength that arrives when a person decides his story is not finished. The precision of someone who no longer needs to be believed immediately because he is prepared to prove everything eventually. Do not confuse patience with weakness. Do not confuse quietness with defeat. Do not mistake the time it takes for truth to surface as evidence that truth has disappeared. Some truths move slowly because they are carrying the weight of everything buried on top of them. But buried is not the same as gone. Document everything. Preserve messages. Keep records. Write down dates. Find people whose loyalty is to the truth rather than your comfort. Do not allow rage to make you careless. Do not give your enemy the reaction he prepared for. Become more patient than the person who wronged you. And when your moment arrives, do not waste it trying to sound powerful. Evidence is powerful. Truth spoken quietly is powerful. A complete record placed on the correct table is more powerful than any thread. The morning I confronted Dennis, I did not shout. I did not threaten violence. I did not destroy his furniture or demand that he beg. I sat inside my own living room and told him exactly what I possessed. His confidence disappeared without me raising my voice. That was not revenge. It was accountability. Revenge would have kept Dennis at the center of my life. Accountability allowed me to remove him from it. That difference saved me. I still wake from dreams in which I am inside the cell. For several seconds, I cannot remember the gate opened. Then I hear the house. Pipes moving inside the walls. Rain against the windows. Lauren closing a cabinet. Marcus asking whether there are pancakes. Ordinary sounds. Sounds I once believed I would never hear again. Some mornings, I touch the watch my father gave me. The only possession from my old life that remained with me through prison. The face is scratched. The band has been repaired twice. It still keeps time. That seems appropriate. Time continued. And so did I. One Saturday, Marcus asked whether he could have the watch when I died. Lauren nearly dropped her coffee. Marcus. What? He is going to die someday. I laughed harder than I had in months. Then removed the watch and placed it inside his hand. You do not have to wait that long. His eyes widened. Really? Really? But you need to take care of it. He examined the scratches. What happened to it? It went through a difficult time. Like you? Yes. Does it still work? It does. Marcus fastened it loosely around his small wrist. Then it is okay. Children sometimes understand healing better than adults. They do not expect the scratches to disappear. They only ask whether something still works. I am not the same man who entered prison. I am not supposed to be. There are parts of me that remain damaged. There are moments I cannot retrieve. Trust does not come easily. Crowded rooms sometimes make me search for the nearest exit. Locked doors sound different than they did before. But I still work. I still love. I still laugh. I am still here. That is the answer to what they did. Not Dennis's sentence. Not the company documents. Not the recovered house. My continued existence. My daughter's return. My grandson's hand inside mine. Every ordinary morning they failed to prevent. The people who tried to erase me believed the story had ended when the judge announced my sentence. They believed 12 years was a period at the end of my name. They were wrong. It was a comma. My name is Frank Callahan. I was betrayed by my wife. Framed by my business partner. Convicted by evidence created to destroy me. And imprisoned for 9 years. I walked out with $43. A dead telephone. A damaged watch. And the truth. The truth was the only thing they had failed to take. In the end, it was enough. I got my company back. I got my house back. I got my name back. More importantly, I got Saturday mornings with a boy who is my stubbornness, his grandmother's eye for color, and very strong opinions about where forks belong. The people who tried to erase me are gone.
I am still here.
Keep fighting. Keep records. Be patient. Speak carefully. And never allow the person who harmed you to decide when your story is finished. Truth may be delayed. It may be buried. It may be ignored. But buried truth has a way of pushing upward. And when it finally reaches the surface, every lie built above it begins to collapse. I know because I watched it happen. I lived through the burial. I survived the waiting. And I was standing there when the truth returned my life to me.
I am living proof.